Well, welcome back to Snetterton, everybody, or welcome along if you didn't join us for the first race of the day in the Focus Cup Championship. But we've got race 2 of 3 coming up for you here at Snetterton on the 300 circuit under what are still slightly chilly autumnal conditions, but beautiful skies, fantastic weather. Now, this grid is formed based on the finishing positions from the race earlier on, but the grid is reversed in batches of 6. So in other words, if you won the race, which Lewis Clark did, he'll start from 6th. If you finish 6th, like Alistair Topley did, you start from pole, and then 7th through to 13th or 7th through to 12th get reversed, from 13th through to 18 get reversed, and so on. Batches of 6 all the way through the order get reversed. I think it's a random grid for our third race of the day that we'll see coming up. The championship is already sorted. Lewis Clark, who starts from 6th, already the champion. If you joined us earlier on today, you'll be aware of that. If you didn't, then he'd already secured the championship at Donington Park. He's the first ever driver to claim back-to-back titles in the Focus Cup Championship since it first appeared on UK circuits back in 2019. The vast majority of the cars are the diesel engine, the 2-litre TDCI engine machines, albeit the new development cars, which are being introduced into the championship next year, which will go off the back of the grid, are petrol engine cars. They're the ST Mark 3.5 and produce a lot more brake horsepower. So off they go onto their final formation lap. We should be able to guide you through the order then and the way that this grid lines up for what is round 14 of the 2024 Focus Cup Championship. Alistair Topley starts from pole position, and Simon Watts will be the car that is alongside him. It's Craig Ballantyne and Ian Howard, who had a very busy race earlier on today, that line up there on row number 2. And row 3 of the grid, it was John Baker, who finished 2nd earlier on, and alongside him is the winner from earlier on, as that top 6 get reversed, Lewis Clark. Row 4 of the grid, car number 285, Bryony Davies, lines up alongside Adam Winter on the 4th row of the grid. And as we move on to row number 5, Simon Langford has Richard Hall for company on row number 5. Mark McCann made good progress from a lower grid position earlier on today. What can he do from row 6 of the grid? He's got Sarah Hall that lines up alongside him. And on row number 7, it is Cameron Ferrero Mack that has Abby Walton for company. Then it's Ainsley Bird and Craig Appleton that form row number 8, with the 9th row of the grid being retirees from earlier on today, Simon Waugh and Thomas Brown on row number 9. And row 10 of the grid is Ian Graham and the first of the petrol engine development cars for next year, Gary Mitchell. And then the final row of the grid, the man behind the championship at the wheel of the second of the 2 test cars that's being introduced into the championship next year, the petrol engine machine of Simon Walton. So that's the way that the grid is formed. Thomas Brown and Ian Graham, who line up 18th and 19th respectively, have been put to the back of the grid following a small incident that they were involved with, or incidents they were involved with in the race earlier on today. So they've had grid drops applied. And in the race earlier on, Ian Graham did a good job of carving his way from what was 19th on the grid up through the order. He's got exactly the same to do again this time through. So he'll be hoping for a better race, a cleaner race, and hopefully no incidents in this one. So they're weaving their way from side to side to try and build the temperature and the control Nankang tyres that all of the cars run. It's very much an arrive and drive championship. It's a set price for the weekend, which includes the entry into the race, testing as well on the Friday, tyres, consumables, diesel, all included, with basic hospitality as well. There is obviously damage to pay for if you damage the cars, but again, Simon Walton and the team at Focus Cup do have arrangements in place so that you can mitigate some of those damages by paying additional fees, or insurance would be the wrong thing to do. It's not the correct word. But they have a scheme in place to allow damage to be addressed. So it's slightly breezy, it's slightly chilly. We saw a good race from them earlier on, not least of which the battle sort of third, fourth backwards was a huge train of cars that were all busy battling away. Ian Howard, Craig Ballantyne, Simon Watts, Alistair Topley, Mark McCann, Richard Hall were all pretty much inseparable for the vast majority of the race. But of course, with the batches of 6 getting reversed, it does mean there's a bit more overtaking to do for some of the quicker cars in this one. Alistair Topley, who starts from pole, was running in 3rd place in the race earlier on today before he had a spin down at Agostini. He stalled the car. It took him a while to get going again. He fired it back up again and dropped from 3rd to 7th at the end of that lap. And he just didn't make any further progress from there, really. But what was disappointment for him in race number 1 does mean that with the reverse grid race, he lines up 6th in this one. He finished 7th earlier on, and that is because those petrol engine cars go to the back again in reality. So Simon Walton, who came from the back of the grid to finish 3rd, goes back to the back of the grid because both the number 20 and the number 25 Mark 3.5s are not scoring points in this one. They'll start off the back. They will work their way through the order because they've got 300 brake horsepower compared to the 175 of the diesel engine machines, but they will not score championship points, and they will also be back to the back of the grid for the final race of the day. So the yellow and black and white car is Simon Topley, who sits there on pole position. Similarly liveried car, the other Power Max car, but it's more white on that one. Simon Watts lines up alongside. We've got 15 minutes on the clock. We'll very shortly get the green flag waving at the tail end of the field, and then we'll get this penultimate race of the 2024 season under beautiful blue skies here underway at Snetterton. Red lights are on. The revs begin to rise. The puff of the little particulate smoke out the back, and away go the TDCI engined Ford Focus Cup cars. Good start from Alistair Topley, who's got the jump on Simon Watts, who I think should still slot his way through into 2nd position. It's been a great start from the champion. He's already up into 3rd from 6th on the grid. Brilliant start from Lewis Clark, already making some good progress at the wheel of his silver and blue and pink machine. He really has been the man to beat so far this year. Already 9 wins out of the 13 races that we've had. And he's through to 2nd by the 2nd corner. Up the inside at the Wilson hairpin of Simon Watts. Through he goes and picks up the place. So everybody's safely through the 1st corner and the 2nd corner. Up towards the left-hander at Palmer they will go for the first time. And it is already, by the look of things, Alistair Topley looking to try and hang on to the lead of the race. But Lewis Clark, the champion from this year, is already with him. Is he going to be close enough as they head down in towards the braking area for Agostini for the first time? This is where Alistair Topley had the spin in the race earlier on. Nice and neat and tidy. And he accelerates his way out of Agostini with Lewis Clark in 2nd place. Simon Watts sitting there in 3rd position. Through the little left-hand kink at Hamilton they'll go for the first time. And the top 3 look as though they've got a bit of daylight between themselves and the car that's there in 4th position, which is John Baker, who's there in 4th place. And 5th place is going to be Craig Ballantyne at the wheel of the K&N liveried machine. Simon Wall from the back of the grid trying to make progress after his retirement earlier on today. Craig Appleton also at the wheel of the black and the Dayglow yellow car is just heading through shot now. He was another retiree earlier on. He had a spin down at Brundle and Nelson and retired the car, and he's been chased around by Thomas Brown, another retiree from earlier on today. But for the lead of the race, nose to tail they'll go. Lewis Clark looking for the lead. Can he get the outside line through Brundle for the inside at Nelson? No, he's too far away from Alistair Topley at the moment, but we have had a change for 3rd place. Simon Watts no longer in 3rd. Diving through goes John Baker, the man who lies 2nd in the championship standings, and is potentially on for his best ever championship finish, having finished 4th in the championship over the course of the last couple of seasons. So the front 2, just with that little bit of daylight between themselves and John Baker in the blue car that's there in 3rd position, round through Coreham, up towards the braking area for the completion of lap number 1. So through Murray's they will go, and as they accelerate their way onto the Senna straight this time, it's going to be the pole sitter Alistair Topley that has led this first lap of the race, but he's got the double former champion, the reigning champion, Lewis Clark, right behind him in the slipstream, looking to try and draw himself alongside when they get towards Ritchie's corner. He's almost there, but he's just going to have to sit behind Alistair Topley as they head round through Ritchie's and see if he can take a slightly tighter line out of the corner to try something up at the Wilson hairpin. But Alistair Topley instantly moves from the left of the circuit to the centre section of the circuit just to protect that inside line should the attack come. Now John Baker's caught up with them already as a result of this, so it's Topley from Clark from Baker, the top three, as they head down the short straight and up towards the left-hander at Palmer. Easy to run wide at the exit of Palmer. It is very slightly downhill on the way in, and then just starts to very slightly climb on the way out. Not by much, because Snetterton, by very nature of being an old airfield, is a very, very flat circuit. But there are subtle undulations throughout, and again, Lewis Clark just looking to see what he might be able to do. For the moment, it's just be content with sitting where he is in second place. Long way to go in the race, and there'll certainly be some opportunities that will present themselves later around the 15 minutes. Simon Moore was looking to make more progress there at the wheel of his car, trying to squeeze his way through, and I think that was Cameron Ferraro-Mack that he was trying to get through and past. Hasn't quite been able to do so, and in fact loses a place to Ian Graham. I think the JCB liveried number 27 machine sneaking through there, and that's down towards the bottom of the top 10 or top 12 that will be. But for the lead of the race, the top two have just managed to edge away again slightly from the third place car of John Baker, and there's problems, and that's Thomas Brown who is off. He should be able to rejoin the circuit, but he's a long way off on the grass at Oggie's Corner. There's a slight amount of damage to the front of his car, but that may well have been from earlier on in the weekend. But it's Alistair Topley that leads the way from the number one car of Lewis Clark, who will be racing in one of the petrol engine machines last year. That was the prize that he won for securing the 2024 Focus Cup Championship. He gets to drive one of the 2-litre petrol engine machines next year. We're expecting at least half a dozen of those on the grid, and it does look as though it's 2 retirements out of 2 now by the look of things. Thomas Brown doing a really sensible thing as a driver, finding a gap in the barriers, reversing his car through it, which at least means there's not even the requirement for any yellow flags as a result of that sensible driving. So leading 3, about to come through and complete lap number 2. The lead advantage was just 0.2 of a second last time through between Alistair Topley and Lewis Clark. This time as they go through, it's extended slightly, not by much. It's still just over 0.2 of a second, heading towards 0.3. But again, Lewis Clark looks much, much quicker mid-corner through Ritchie's, and again realises that Alistair Topley is going to cover off the inside line into the braking area for Wilson. So Lewis Clark takes a wider line in. Doesn't need to worry about John Baker particularly, because he's a bit too far away to try anything up at that section of the circuit at that point. But the three of them again have got themselves back together again as they head up towards Palmer. But it's the Power Max car of Alistair Topley that leads the way. The champion right behind Lewis Clark. John Baker, who's been 4th in this championship for the last couple of years, sitting there in 3rd position. John Baker was 7th in the championship back in 2021, but 4th for the last 2 years. And he, as I say, is running 2nd in the championship and has further stretched the advantage between himself and Simon Watts, who you could argue is now his main championship rival for runner-up spot, because Ian Mitchell was 3rd in the points coming into this weekend, but Ian isn't racing this weekend. So the runner-up spot is really between John Baker and Simon Watts, and John so far outscored Simon in qualifying. He outscored him in race number 1, and at the moment he is outscoring Simon Watts in race number 2, because John Baker is 3rd, Simon Watts is 4th. So leading trio out of Williams, start to head along the Bentley straight. Is this the opportunity now for Lewis Clark to close up a little bit more as they head down the straight? See, Alistair Topley is hugging that left-hand side of the circuit to protect the inside line up towards Brundle, but you can make it stick if you go outside at Brundle. It gives you the inside line for Nelson, and I think that's what Lewis Clark is looking to do. Or is he? No, can't quite do it this time through. So Alistair Topley still leads the way. Make sure you clip the apex but not the sausage curb at Nelson, otherwise it'll unsettle the car. You'll pretty much take the bomb hole flat out in these cars. So pitch the car in, make sure you don't run wide onto the curbs on the exit of the corner, and then it's a case of just feathering the throttle, and the car will slide around a little bit as you're on the edge of adhesion coming round through Coreham. And then you progressively brake, you start to brake and then increase the brake pressure as you still keep turning right, but then need to flick the car left in towards Murray's. And in these cars, pick up the throttle nice and early, lots of torque to pull you out of the corner. Don't over rev the car because it's a diesel engine, keep it in the torque curve, and that's what Lewis Clark is looking to do. Again, he jinks out from behind Alistair Topley, draws himself alongside on the run up towards Ritchie's corner. What can he do this time? He's got himself fully alongside. He's going to go through and pick up the lead of the race. He's got it done before Ritchie's corner. So Lewis Clark now leads the way. Alistair Topley in 2nd position. John Baker in 3rd place. And Lewis Clark doing what he's done really for the last couple of seasons. John Baker brakes very late heading down in towards Wilson. closes right up onto the coattails of Alistair Topley, and he's trying to unlock the door on the way out. There's a little bit of bumping between the pair of them, but John Baker is through because Alistair Topley was a bit slow coming out of the Wilson hairpin. So John Baker's through into second position. Alistair Topley, the pole sitter on this batches of 6 that are reversed for the grid in race number 2, down to third place, but already looking to try and re-attack on the run up towards Agostini. So John Baker goes defensive. He tries to protect the inside line, but actually drops back down to third place. Alistair Topley has made it stick. So from the lead down to second, down to third, back to second. Busy race for him already, with 6.5 minutes of the scheduled 15 still to go. Simon Watts in the number 23 car still there in fourth position, but he is now 5.5, nearly 6 seconds adrift of those around. Fifth place is going to be number 37, Ian Howard, and completing the top 6 at the moment is, off the back of the grid, Simon Walton at the wheel of one of the petrol-engined Mark 3.5s that join the championship next year. So already 2 cars built, the third is in build. So it's going to be a busy winter for Simon Walton and the team up there in the northeast, building the cars for the 2025 Focus Cup, which will be a split grid in reality. So we'll have the diesel engine cars still part of it, but the petrol engine cars are surely likely to become more populous. And there is that petrol engine number 20 car, just heading up the inside, looking to try and sneak through and ahead of Ian Howard, but can't quite make it stick. So the Dorenza-backed machine of Ian Howard still sits ahead of the first of the 2 ABS-backed cars, the first of which is Simon Walton, the next of which will be Mark McCann, won't it, the number 64 car. And there's the other test car that we've got out. That's the car that's in the hands of Gary Mitchell. Running wide there, coming out of the corner, was the car of Craig Ballantyne. He started third on the grid, but was down to 9th at the end of the previous lap. So now, in a straight line, Simon Walton, you would think, should be able to pick off fairly effortlessly the number 37 car of Ian Howard. He's got 125 brake horsepower more. He's got the petrol engine car at his disposal, so through he goes. Another place gain for Simon Walton. Means that the number 20 car off the back of the grid is now up into 5th place, but remember, non-point scoring for both Simon Walton and for the other petrol engine car, which is Gary Mitchell. Good fights further down through the order. Ian Graham making progress. Craig Appleton going wheel to wheel with Cameron Ferrado Flack, and slight mistake there from Craig Appleton heading in towards Ritchie. He's had to adjust his line to make sure he stayed on the tarmac, and straight away that allows Cameron Ferraro Flack to pick the place up. So Cameron, I think, is one of the couple of drivers we've got in the field that's been working as a mechanic for the Focus Cup for the vast majority of this season, and he's having his first outing in the championship. Kept his nose clean in race number 1 and had a reasonable finish, finished 17th in the race earlier on as it was ultimately. Started this race from 13th on the grid, and at the end of that lap was running in 14th position. Should still be in 14th place now that he's managed to sneak his way back through and ahead of Craig Appleton's car following his very small mistake heading in towards Ritchie's. So they head through the left-hander at Hamilton with 3.5 minutes just over of this race to go. The fastest lap of the race has gone the way of one of the petrol engine cars, not unsurprisingly. There's Bryony Davies at the wheel of the Powerflex car. Her brother George has been another of those drivers that's been busy behind the scenes with Focus Cup this year. He's again done a lot of the mechanicking, does a lot of driver coaching. In fact, very much a racing family, Bryony and George, and Dad as well, who hopefully might venture out into Focus Cup in the future as well. Right, out of Brundle and Nelson. Now, the second of the 2 petrol engine cars, which is Gary Mitchell, the number 25 car, starting to close in on Mark McCann. Mark McCann is also trying to see what he can do about Ian Howard, which is the number 37 car that lies ahead of him. And just ahead of those is going to be Simon Walton at the wheel of the number 20 car. In fact, that might be Simon Watts now, as Simon Walton, I think, might have gained another place. So through and over the start-finish line, they'll be on to their penultimate lap of the race this time through. Lewis Clark leading by over a second. And now Alistair Topley under attack from John Baker, who's trying all the way around the outside at Ritchie's corner. Still with the outside line at Wilson, but if he can make it stick at Wilson, which it looks as though he might be able to, can he get the car stopped and turned in? No, he can't. Runs a little bit wide. That means that's going to compromise his exit speed. So for the moment, Alistair Topley still clings on to second place, not for want of trying from John Baker, who had a good nibble there, but was just a bit too late on the brakes at the Wilson hairpin. So through the left-hander at Palmer, starting to stretch their legs again down the short straight, so in towards the braking area for Agostini. You can either take the usual racing line in, or you can take a later apex if you want to try and get on the power that little bit earlier coming out of the corner. For Alistair Topley, it's the usual line. John Baker follows in his footsteps. And those two cars fighting over second and third place are still about 10 seconds up the road from the fourth place car, which is number 23 Simon Watts, so they can afford to slow each other up to a degree because they're not under pressure from anybody behind. So through Oggies, starting to head up towards Williams, one of the really important corners on the circuit. Williams, such an important corner, as is Murray's the final corner, because the speed you carry out of there, you carry all the way along the next straight. So John Baker trying to get on the throttle as soon as he can, but also conscious that if you get on too early, the car washes wide and you have to get back off it again. So down the straight up towards Brundle and Nelson. Lewis Clark on course for win number 10 of the 14 races that we've had so far this season. He won both of the races at Donington Park that opened the 2024 championship season. He won both races at Brands Hatch. He won both races at Alton Park. He finished second in both races at Silverstone. He finished second in both races at Croft. He won both races last time out in the second visit to Donington Park, and so far this weekend he's won the race earlier on today. So his worst finish of the season are 2 second places. Other than that, it's been wins all of the way from him, and such is the squabble that's going on between Alistair Topley and John Baker for second and third place. It certainly looks as though Lewis Clark is on course to scoop up another win, because he'll be heading on to his final lap of the race this time through. So 20 seconds to go. 6 laps completed. We squeezed 7 laps out of the race earlier on today. It looks as though it's going to be the same distance this time through. Alistair Topley still under the cosh from John Baker. John again taking a normal racing line in towards Ritchie's corner. See if he can get a bit of an undercut on the way out. Alistair Topley instantly will cover that off on the run down in towards the Wilson hairpin. John Baker, we saw last time, was a bit too late on the brakes going down there, so he learns from that this time and makes sure he doesn't lose any time to Alistair Topley. Tries to get on the power a little bit sooner coming out of the corner and has drawn himself alongside, but it's the right-hand side, and that's the outside line for the left-hander at Palmer that's coming up. So Alistair Topley will just make sure he keeps that car position there. And even if John Baker tries all the way around the outside, the next corner that's coming up is Agostini, which is another left-hander again. But John seems to have a bit more pace in a straight line. There's a bit more particulate smoke coming out of Alistair Topley's car, so maybe it's just breathing a little bit heavier. But certainly Alistair Topley is doing a very good job of hanging on to second place. This could be the opportunity to get the undercut on the way out, though. John Baker is not quite going to do it, so it's still the power-maxed machine that's just ahead of the blue number 10 car of John Baker. As I say, they've got that gap so that they don't need to worry about slowing each other up, because Simon Watts is still 10 plus seconds behind. In fact, he's even further behind now, because he's now nearly 12 seconds back from this squabble for second and third place as they head on to the Bentley Straight for what will be the final time this time through. So down the Bentley Straight, what can John Baker do about Alistair Topley? He is drawing himself alongside, and I think he's ahead. Is Alistair Topley slowing? I think he might be, you know. Yes, he is. Alistair Topley is slowing going down the Bentley Straight, so there is a problem with that car, and the car that was running in second place has dropped to third and surely will drop further down through the order. That will promote the number 23 car of Simon Watts up a position. Alistair Topley knows all is not well and parks the car right at the bottom of the Bentley Straight, and I'm afraid that's disappointment for the pole sitter. Good race from him, but not to be, I'm afraid. So it's going to be Lewis Clark from Jonathan Baker, and then Simon Watts and co. all queuing up over what will be third and fourth position. But out of the final corner comes Lewis Clark. He is heading up towards the start-finish line. He's already the champion for this year. He knows that this weekend is all about just enjoying himself and proving a point, really, which he's done all season. That is another win. That's win 10 out of 14 races so far this season for Lewis Clark. Jonathan Baker finishes in second position, and I think mathematically now that probably secures him the runners-up spot in the championship for this year. And who's going to finish in third place? It is just going to be Simon Watts that finishes in third place, but chased to the line by Ian Howard, who finishes in fourth place. Mark McCann will finish in fifth position. Simon Langford will finish in sixth place. Then it's going to be Craig Ballantyne that will be seventh, ahead of Richard Hall in eighth place. Ninth place will go the way of Gary Mitchell in the petrol engine car off the back of the grid, and completing the top 10. I think it'll be number 4 coming through, which is Adam Winter. So all of the cars in the top 15 already through. Just waiting for the next couple of cars to come through, which should be Ashley Bird to come through. There's Simon Waugh, who didn't quite make the progress I would have thought at the wheel of the number 22 car. He started 17th and finished 15th, so I think there's still a bit more to come from Simon, because he knows these cars well. He finished third in the championship last year. It just didn't quite happen for him in that one. So the cars on their slowing down lap, I think there's a couple more to take the checkered flag, which will include Abby Walton to take the checkered flag, and potentially Sarah Hall is yet to come through at the wheel of the Mintex liveried number 21 car. But other than that, everybody else is through to take the checkered flag, and that will be our penultimate race of the 2024 championship season done. So lots of arm waving from the marshals to the drivers, and just to thank them for their efforts. But for Lewis Clark, well, it is what he's done all season, really. It's another win from him, and he seems to do it. Doesn't matter whether it is qualifying or whether it's the reverse grid races. He has been mega this season. Let's confirm the results for you then for the penultimate race of the 2024 Focus Cup Championship season. Round 14 of the championship. Lewis Clark wins for the 10th time this season from John Baker in second place, and third place is going to be Simon Watts. Fourth place was Ian Howard with Mark McCann and Simon Langford completing the top 6. Craig Ballantyne finished in 7th place, with 8th place going the way of Richard Hall. Then it was Gary Mitchell in one of the test and development cars that was 9th place, and completing the top 10 was Adam Winter. Then as we move outside of the top 10, in 11th position it was Ian Graham. Good progress from what was 19th on the grid to always get himself inside the top 10. Bryony Davis was there in 12th place. 13th place was Cameron Ferrero-Mack, ahead of the 14th place car, which was Craig Appleton, and Simon Waugh was 15th. 16th was Ashley Ainsley Bird, I should say. 17th was Abby Walton. Alistair Topley will be classified in 18th, but didn't see the checkered flag as he retired on the final lap, and it was Sarah Hall and Abby Walton that completed the top 20. Then as we move outside of the top 20, there was just one other car that retired very early on. Thomas Brown, I'm afraid. He was a retiree in our penultimate race of the season for the Focus Cup Championship. Well, that's our penultimate race of the season. We will be bringing you live action from the final race of the season. What I gather is going to be a random grid draw, so we really don't know how the grid is going to line up. But that final race will be taking place here at Snetterton later on this afternoon, around about 5:15, so 17:15. Set your alarms, go and grab yourself a cup of tea. We'll catch you later. Goodbye.